Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. My guest today is someone who I regard as one of the nice guys of dentistry, one of nature's true gentlemen. And of course, I'm referring to Berris Sultry, who's one of the directors of Dental Innovations. Dental Innovations is a company that I regard as one of the original disruptors of the industry. It was formed by Merv Sultry, Berris's dad. And in this conversation, we talk about disruption, we talk about values and ethics in business, we talk about how they grew the business from nothing into something really substantial. And of course, along the way, Berris shares some absolute pearls of wisdom that if you really listen closely, you're going to be able to extract those lessons out of his story and make them directly relevant to your story and your journey in business. He's a really nice guy and there's some absolute wonderful pearls of wisdom here. Now, before we get to that conversation with Berris, I want to share with you a resource from our friends at CPD Junkie. CPD Junkie is the most comprehensive online directory of CPD in Australia, bar none. And what they've got on their website is an ebook which shows you how to get the most out of your CPD. It's a really great resource. I'd recommend it whether you're a principal of a practice, whether you're an associate of a practice, or if you have associates of your practice, share it with them because it's a really valuable resource. All you need to do is head across to cpdjunkie.com.au/e-book and download it. It's completely free. It's a resource for you to help you get the most out of your CPD, which we all know is compulsory. And we want to make sure you're getting the best return on that investment. But now, let's get on to our conversation with Berris Sultry. I know you're going to love this conversation. So as always, have a pen and paper handy because there's some absolute pearls you're going to want to jot down. Here he is. Berris Sultry, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us, mate. How's things in your neck of the woods?
Very good, thank you, Jesse, and thank you very much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, mate. We've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time, and I can't wait to get into it, mate, because there's so much that I want to ask you about, so many things I want to learn from you today, and I'm sure the audience is in for a real treat. So I wanted to ask you, because you're very well known in the dental profession, Dental Innovations is very well known in the profession, and I'll ask you a little bit about the early days of DI in a moment. But I'm curious to ask about the early days of Berris, because ultimately, when you mapped out your career at 17 or 18, perhaps it was obvious to you that you'd end up in this role. Perhaps it wasn't. I'm curious to ask, how did you find your path into the role you're in now?
Yeah, well, I guess Dental Innovations didn't exist when we graduated from university. So both myself and Tim went to Flinders University over in Adelaide. And we both travelled after we finished university. And then we came back home. I was working as an operations manager in a wholesale business in the fruit and vegetable markets. And that was from a relationship previously up in Mildura that I worked for that company. At that same time, Merv Sultry was establishing Dental Innovations, my father, and progressively that started to get a bit more momentum. I finished up my role in the wholesale and then Merv invited myself to come in for a couple of weeks to see if I liked what he was doing. Tim had come into the business a year before and that's where we find ourselves now.
Mate, that's fantastic. And I'm always curious to ask with siblings, of course, what's it like working with family members? How do you find that experience? Because there'll be some people on this podcast who work with their spouses, work with their parents, work with their siblings. What's the family dynamic like? Do you always talk about business at the dinner table, or what's the dynamic like there?
Yeah, look, we tried to keep it separate, so it took a little while to get there. But we, understand that you have your two different roles effectively as family members, but also in the business as well. There needs to be a little bit of a distinction there. So when you catch up, you catch up as family. In the business, if anybody who works with family business, it's good. But the key factor to it is trust. So, and you can speak directly to each other and move forward quite quickly. If there's any issues and come to understandings. So you always got each other's back, and that's one of the key parts to it. How you can trust the people that you're working with.
Yeah, I really like that, and probably stating the obvious, I guess, but I don't want to run that risk of assuming. But is there a bit of an intuitive understanding between you and Tim and Merv there? So do you know what sort of decisions each other would make? And do you feel confident, like if Tim's not around, you go, well, I can make this decision knowing that Tim's going to be okay with it? Is there that kind of depth of understanding that comes from being a family member that might not exist otherwise?
Yeah, you generally have a good understanding of how each other thinks. And you're always acting in the best interest of the business and each other, which is a key thing. So you can make decisions and then understand, people can understand why you made that decision. So you can back each other up in that respect.
Yeah.
You can never really anticipate how anybody's going to think. There's always sometimes we have different views on things, but we can talk our way through it.
Yeah, nice. And out of curiosity, who's the older sibling?
Tim is.
Okay.
He's got a couple of years on me.
So does he pull seniority, or is it scissors, papers, rock when there's a disagreement?
Sometimes it's still always that the dynamic of older brother.
Yeah, I've got an older sister. I totally get it. All right, mate. Just moving on from that, obviously Dental Innovations is a very well-established company now. It's been in the market now for 20-odd years, as you said. And, it's a tremendously successful company. It's really well-regarded as well. What I wanted to ask you is what it was like going through that startup phase. Your dad obviously has a background in banking. What was it like going through that startup phase, watching your dad transition out of one role and into another, and then seeing how that evolved? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I guess when we started at Dental Innovations myself, Merv was up and running with it. So in respect to what he did, started at Dental Innovations, he was, if you talk about disruption, that was probably one of the first disruptions to the dental industry, 20 odd years ago. So actually getting dentists working proactively together was no mean feat because it was a different industry 20 years ago. So, being able to put that together and take forward takes a lot of passion and commitment. And that's what Merv had in the business, to be able to create it. And then we came on board with the journey with him. So progressively, as we sort of learnt skills and became more involved in the business, we took our own path forward as well.
Yeah, lovely. So I'm curious to ask about that passion, that energy that Merv had, because it does take a lot of passion. It does take a lot of energy to start a business. And you mentioned that the dental profession was quite different 20 years ago. What sort of changes have you seen in that 20 years since that time? Because back then it was hard to get people to work collaboratively. Is it easier now? Is it still challenging? What are the things that you've observed over the 20 years of your time in the profession?
The principles are still the same in terms of independent practice owners. So the guys who own and operate their own practice, still have all the same pressures of running a business as well as a dental practice and having the clinical side of the business as well. So those fundamentals are still there. I guess the external environment around it has changed quite considerably. And that comes from the supply side of things, but also the advent of corporate dentistry has been a major impact, as well as the influence on the health funds have also increased quite dramatically. So that's putting external pressures on business owners in terms of competition and also price. It's quite a few different dynamics at play.
Yeah. Okay. So, obviously it has been 20 years of change, particularly the last 10, I would say. You're using your crystal ball, and I know that crystal balls are notoriously foggy, but where do you see the next 10 or so years going? Are we going to continue further along that path, do you think? Is the independent practice something that you think is going to exist, or do you think that some will ultimately fold, or do you think there's going to be just a really nice niche for independent practices?
We think that, that there will actually be an increasing role for independent practices, differentiating themselves in the marketplace against corporate dentistry or, vertically integrated health fund clinics as well. So having the owner-operated dentist who's got the genuine concern or health concern for the patients is quite a critical differentiation. I'm not saying the other corporates don't offer that, but, coming from an owner-operator is quite sincere. The way it seems to be evolving in terms of the health funds, they vertically integrating with their own practices, delivering dental services. And there seems to be a rationalisation of preferred provider agreements and networks. So by default, you're seeing an increase in independent practices. We sort of determine an independent practice is an owner-operator, but then sort of the next level where there's no association with health funds as preferred provider. So you'll find more and more practices entering into that space as well.
Do you think that some preferred provider practices are at risk of being cut adrift from those schemes?
I believe so, yes. And I think you'll find that it's harder to get into preferred provider agreements. Some of the health funds aren't offering them, or they've hit a limit in that area.
Yep.
So that's certainly occurring as well. So some people won't have a choice. They simply won't be offered that option.
Okay, so if there's going to be this uptick in independent practices, which makes sense, based on what you've said there, that totally makes sense. What do you think are the key drivers for success in that independent practice model? I know relationships are going to be key. What else do you think are going to be really important for business owners to understand in that particular role?
It's understanding that you are competing against large corporate organisations as well. The corporates are on another journey. And it's providing that economies of scales to be able to compete on a business sense, but also tapping into a collective peer base of other independent practice owners is going to be critical for support. So that's where the sort of collaborative approach takes place. And, the communication to the patients that there is a point of difference between, being an independent or a, part of the community effectively, living and operating in your own community and being part of that, and differentiating yourself between what a corporate or a health fund is offering in their practices as well. So, it's that level of care and communication that you can achieve as a practice owner, which will be critical distinction.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted just to wind the hands of time back for a little while, because I want to just go back to some of your upbringing, because you've had quite an interesting upbringing, with Merv being in banking, learning the ropes as he did there, understanding finance, doing those things, but obviously moving around from town to town in regional Victoria predominantly. I wanted to ask you around some of the lessons that you've taken away that have served you well in business from that experience. Moving schools, moving locations, all those sorts of things. What are the things that you remember as a kid from that upbringing? And specifically, how have they shaped your view and how have they shaped your ability to build such a successful business?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it's certainly a reflection, a good upbringing, being able to move around through regional Victoria. And that was where Merv had built his career in the bank in agribusiness and achieved quite a senior level. So we moved every couple of years. And I think that, in retrospect, gave us good communication and people skills, being able to fit into new environments, getting exposed to different ways of life as well as we moved around different places in country Victoria. Yeah, so it certainly, I think it put us in good stead to be able to talk to people from any facet and communicate quite well.
Yeah. I was saying to you as well off air that, sometimes when we're hiring team members as well, one of the things I've noticed, again, massive generalization here, is that, I find country people generally have got a really strong work ethic. They're generally just really nice people and they're such a pleasure to have in the practice. So, again, I know this is going to be a massive generalization, but, if I had the opportunity to employ country people, I'd do that all day, every day, because they come with that ability to fit in. They come with that ability to talk to a eclectic range of people, such as our patients. They come with batteries included, as I call it, because they've got a strong work ethic. They get it done. And it's great. And, so I think there's some wonderful lessons, growing up in the country. And obviously you experienced that as well. And I'm also curious to ask, what did you learn from Merv during that period of time? Because, again, Merv's a towering figure in dentistry. He's been around the traps for a long time. He's seen a lot, done a lot. What did you learn from Merv specifically?
Growing up?
Oh, in general.
Yeah, look, like any father, it's instilling the correct values, I think, is quite important to what we learned with Merv. And, honesty, integrity, working hard, that's some of the fundamentals of what we're brought up with. And they've carried through to in our careers as well. So, one of the key values of dental innovation is just that level of integrity that Merv instilled with us. You have to deliver on what you're saying and people need to trust you. And that's pretty fundamental to getting support and delivering what you say.
I think there's some great business lessons just there, ladies and gents. So let's talk about dental innovations for a moment. How did DI look when it first started and what's it look like now? Because I know the business has evolved. It's, a bit like in some ways every business evolves, but what's been the DI journey? How did it start? What did it look like? And what's its nature now? How do you describe it when you tell people what you do?
Yeah, it's a hard one to nail in a couple of sentences, I guess, in what we do. When Merv started Dental Innovations, he started with a business plan and an idea. With that, in conjunction with a couple of other dentists, he was able to get together a foundation group of 40 dentists. And with that sort of initial critical mass, was able to negotiate with supply companies to create an offering for our members, which looks very different to what we are now. From that, we've been able to continually evolve services where we've identified a need in a dental practice and trying to find solutions for them. So from starting at that very humble start, we've now got over 650 members across Australia, about 50 practices in New Zealand. And we're offering about 40 to 50 different services to assist dentists in the operation of their dental practice.
Mate, that's phenomenal. 650 members across the country, plus another 50 in New Zealand. That's a tremendous growth. Well done to you guys. So it sounds like, when people talk about DI, I know the very simplistic version is, people refer to it sometimes as a buying group, but of course DI is much, much more than that. So can you speak to just a bit more about that? Because I want to make sure that people are really clear about what the business does do.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. Yeah, the simplest way for people to understand it is a buying group. We've got a critical mass of membership. But the model of Dental Innovations is that we are a membership organisation and we offer a range of services beyond just simply purchasing. But what we're able to achieve with our critical mass of our members is actually a substantial buying power, which we can, focus with our partners. And what works, we're able to achieve excellent pricing for our members. So on average, it's having about 20% off your consumable purchasing. And our members support our suppliers who are offering that pricing. So it needs to get volume through those suppliers to actually achieve the pricing which we can achieve for our members. So that's sort of the flow of it. With that critical mass, we've been able to talk to a whole range of different suppliers which people use within the dental practice, from consumables to merchant rates with high caps to insurances, equipment purchases. There's a full spectrum of services which we offer, which members are able to tap into, getting that critical mass beyond what a single dentist practice will be able to negotiate. We'll sort of continue to evolve a good IT presence as well. So we systemize the ordering process in a dental practice. So from our partners, you can now order from 10 suppliers at one point rather than, making multiple phone calls or logging onto different sites to order. You can simply order at one point. So it systemizes the ordering process in a dental practice, also achieving the savings. As practice owners generally don't do the ordering themselves, it gives the practice owner control of their ordering process within a practice. So it makes it transparent and it makes it accountable. You can set things like budgets and do reporting from it as well.
Yeah.
So we're also continuing to evolve those sort of systems as well.
Mate, that's fantastic. So again, I really love the way the business has evolved because I know you've got a really high-tech back end there to systemize a lot of things. And I'm curious to ask because, plenty of people listening to this podcast will be interested to know how the business came together because there'll be some skills in there that are transferable. And, in particular, I'm curious to ask you about negotiation because it's not an easy task to go to a large company and try and negotiate a deal. How has that process been for you? What did it entail? And ultimately, what allowed you to create the results that you've been able to create in that negotiation sense? To
be honest, a lot of the hard work was done from the day's move was negotiating. And his business experience allowed him to do that very effectively. Once we sort of achieved that critical mass, then the negotiations came a little bit easier. You still have to prove a business case to the benefit and take the person you're negotiating with on a journey, if you like, to understand where you're coming from and what you're hoping to achieve and the benefits to them as well. So if you approach it with there's a mutual benefit approach and you approach it with good humour and goodwill, I think that's probably the key to getting a good result. And so it comes back to that relationship we spoke about a bit earlier. Yeah, it has to be based on trust and, then you need to deliver on what you're saying from your side of the table as well. Mate, have you ever had anything go awry in this process? Because, again, from an external perspective, it just looks like it's been, one success after another for DI. Have you ever had anything not work out? What have been some of the little lessons that you might have learned along the way? Oh, I think if you ask Merv, he'll show you his scars. There's lots of lessons on the way. We've all got those, mate. Yeah, that's right. So it's never a seamless journey. There's, I guess making sure that you're not making assumptions on what direction you're taking and to engage your membership to find out, the true direction you need to take and what's going to be in value is quite critical because you can head off in a different path and, it's not something that is a direct need for our members. So, that's making sure we engage our members. We're lucky to have a very proactive member forum and that enables our members to engage with us and put forward suggestions. So in many respects, we're member driven. And that's why we're adapting to what our members see as opportunities or needs in the practice, and we're able to find solutions for them with our resources. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how would someone listening to this podcast take that idea and implement that into a practice? Oh, well, I think that, being conscious of your patient's needs probably where it's directly applicable and making sure you're catering to what your demographic is and what the needs of your patients are and making sure that you're engaged with what they want out of your services effectively. Yeah. Positioning yourself to that effect. Yeah, totally. All right.
So obviously there's been a few little battle scars along the way and things have not gone exactly to plan every moment, even though it looks like it has been one success after another. It's always, I think, interesting to note that, every business has their challenges, every business has their headaches. And so for anyone listening to this particular podcast, I'd say if you're going through a challenge, that's normal. And there's that great saying that if you're going through hell, don't stop. Just don't stop to enjoy the view. Just keep moving through. And I think that's a key thing. All right, mate. So I want to ask you, just as we begin to wrap up, mate, who inspires you and why? If you were to have a barbecue or a party or something of that nature, who would you invite around to, have at that gathering? Who are the couple of people that, you go, wow, they're really interesting people. They fascinate me. I've learned a lot from them.
It's probably an interesting one. I probably wouldn't go to your big industry leaders of the like. It's people that you know in your life, it's your family.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people that you'll learn the most from, I think. So, yeah, I'd keep it very simple in that respect, Jesse. Just people who played a role in your life, that have been formulative in your life, be the people I'd have around me.
Mate, fantastic. Sounds like a good barbie indeed. Lots of fun, lots of chatting, and no doubt a bit of laughter along the way too, which will be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Berris, if you were to give the audience one or two key pieces of advice around business, around building a practice, around anything that you think is pertinent, what would those one or two pieces of advice be that you wanted to leave the audience with, mate?
Yeah, it's certainly in the context of practice owners. You're not alone. It can feel very lonely. Make sure you reach out for support and advice and get those external perspectives on things. People have been down that track before, so there's lots of lessons which have been learned, and people will help you. So make sure you ask for help is critical, I think, and make sure that you're doing business on good terms with people. Honesty and integrity and relationships are critical in dentistry. So making sure that our patients understand where you're coming from as well in terms of the way you operate your business and your dentistry.
That's fantastic. If I could add one observation in about DI and its success that I think might be a useful lesson that people could take away, and that is be prepared to play the long game. Dental Innovations has been a business that 20 odd years in the making, an overnight success, 20 years in the making. Hey, Berris.
Yeah.
But I would say to the practice owners, everything Berris said is absolutely gold. And I'd say play for position, play a long game as well. And remember that, the sun will rise tomorrow no matter what you're going through today. Anything you want to add to that, Berris?
Yeah, absolutely. It's keeping a long-term perspective. The times we've just gone through have been unprecedented. Never before has the whole industry shut down effectively. And to come back from that, everybody's in the same boat. So, hopefully we can move through it and get back up to speed quite quickly. But, the challenges that people face in the recent months have been unprecedented. And making sure you've got support and reach out for people to help is the best way to get through this. You're not alone in that respect. But, just making sure that you engage with the right people and get the right advice is critical.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that, mate. So, mate, I'm really grateful to you for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us, Berris. You are what I consider one of the gentlemen of the industry, always just so enjoyable to catch up with. You always, got an ear to lend or a shoulder to lean on, and I really admire the work that you and Tim and Merv have done to get, DI to where it is. Of course, the rest of the team as well, but I know you guys have been, instrumental in driving it. And so from here, all of us here, mate, I really want to salute you because it's a great business. I think it's an Australian success story, and I really would just want to congratulate you on the work that you've done, and mate, keep going because I think it's just a great service to the profession, and long may that continue.
I really appreciate that, Jesse. It's nice to hear. Yeah, look, we're here for independent practices. We're here for guys who own our own business, and we continue to adapt to as the industry changes to make sure our guys are represented and are successful as well. So thank you very much.
All right, mate. Good to catch up. Let's catch up soon, and we'll talk shortly.
Yeah, I look forward to catching up, Jesse, when we're allowed to. We'll grab a beer.
Sounds good. Thanks, mate.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.